Thank you for your patience. You just got a little extra moment to settle yourself in between sessions, which is actually perfect for what we're talking about. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Is this mic in a good level? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, my name is Brielle, and today I'm going to be speaking about embodying bold leadership and really about the somatics of sustainable sacred service. And this session is really, it's less about like the ABCs and 1, 2, 3 of coming home to your body, because that's a long journey. But I want to kind of lay the foundation of what disembodied leadership looks like. And leadership is not just management. It's, as someone defined yesterday, it's people who inspire and influence. So all of you here are leaders because we are pushing up against the status quo. Because I'm speaking about embodiment, there's so much that I could say about it, but it is a lot better if I just start by letting you feel it for yourself and speak to your body and kind of get out of the mind and into the body for a moment. So I'm just going to begin with a 5-minute grounding opportunity. So I invite you to just kind of take a moment to ground. I took my shoes off because I like to have my feet grounded. You might want to connect your feet to the ground, and maybe you feel called to close your eyes and just turn within for a moment. But there's also no pressure. If you don't desire to close your eyes, maybe you just kind of take this quiet moment to settle. And so, as you first begin to turn within and kind of turn down the noise of outside distractions and come into your inner wisdom and knowing, I invite you to notice the natural rhythm of your breath. And as you bring awareness to the breath, it likely naturally begins to lengthen and deepen, and just continuing to ever so gradually slow down each inhale and exhale. And bringing the awareness to the body, feeling your feet firmly rooted to the floor, held and supported by the earth beneath that is always lovingly holding and supporting you. Feeling the weight of the body held and supported by your chair. And on your next exhale, just sinking into that support a little bit more. Noticing if you can be 5 or 10% more comfortable. And just welcoming ease into the body. Taking a deep inhale in through the nose, filling the belly with air, breathing from the belly. And as you exhale, just sending a wave of relaxation from the crown of the head all the way down to the soles of the feet. And taking a few more just like that, taking a deep inhale in through the nose, filling the belly with air. And exhaling. Just feeling yourself soften with each breath out. Taking one more deep inhale. Hold it at the top, just feeling that pause, that sacred pause and spaciousness. And then exhaling, maybe releasing some sound, a sigh. I invite you to bring your chin in towards your chest and slowly roll the head around to the right, just taking some gentle circles in that direction. And then circling the head around in the other direction. And whenever you're ready, you can slowly rise the head back up to neutral. Wiggle the fingers and the toes. And as you start to blink open the eyes, you can actually feel the difference in the room. There's a deeper level of presence and connection to yourself, to your breath, to your body, and ultimately creates a great foundation for deeper connection with one another. So I wanted to start that way before introducing myself because I know that we've been learning a lot and it might feel like a bit of information overload. And so I just wanted to offer that moment to pause. And so now that you've kind of like settled into yourself and felt me a little bit, I'll formally introduce myself. My name is Brielle Ringer, and I am the creator of Be Well with Brielle. I'm also the director of the Global Majority Caucus and run a program called the Black Women's Healing Haven. And really the thread between all of my work is community building and community healing and providing a space for people to feel and expand our capacity to feel so that we essentially sustain and retain the brilliance that's in this movement and also just like take really good care of ourselves because that's important. So how I got to the place that I'm in now where it feels like a beautiful integration of my passion for racial equity, for veganism, wellness, healing, social justice, you know, it feels like a very embodied expression of my sacred service, and it wasn't always like this. And so my journey to this, my background is in social work and psychology, and I used to be the person who was doing it all. You know, I was going to school full-time, I was interning at a place advocating for students' educational rights, I was doing research on college homelessness on my campus and working at a youth homelessness shelter, and while also organizing volunteer trips locally, nationally, internationally. I was doing the most, didn't really know how to say no, and I was also, you know, I was good at what I did. Like I received a lot of awards and external validation for what I was doing, and it felt really important. But there was something within me that felt like it wasn't necessarily like quite what I was here to do, but I didn't know how to shift. And so it kind of came to the point where I was so overwhelmed and so burnt out that I crashed straight into a pole. I drove straight into a pole in a parking lot. And my first thought when I had this accident was, I don't have time for this. I'm supposed to be doing grad school applications. I don't have time for a car accident. And I like went home and a couple days later just was reflecting on that. I'm like, not my health and well-being being my first thought, like my never-ending to-do list. And I was like, I have a very unhealthy relationship with service and work and higher education. And so I felt like at that point I needed to just kind of like step away and heal myself a little bit before I could re-engage in a way that felt more aligned and sustainable. And now, because I have come into this space of being more involved in the animal advocacy and vegan movement, I've been in food and housing justice movement spaces, Black Lives Matter movement spaces, and this is a thread I see through like all people who are helpers and passionate about social justice is you do really meaningful work, but you abandon yourself in the process. And another way is possible. You can do the work that you love, that is meaningful and contributes to the causes that you care about, while also feeling really good and grounded in who you are and fulfilled and sustained in the work. And so I want to offer a couple of things to support you in getting to that place, essentially. So there's a few kind of things that I have noticed specifically around disembodied leadership. So before we talk about embodying bold leadership, kind of talking about what does this look like? And I want you to listen for where you are in the conversation, listen for where it resonates. Maybe it's a past version of you, maybe it's a version of you right now in this moment. And so what I notice with disembodied leadership and living is you might feel really defeated and doubt that your efforts are making a difference. Like, the scope of our work is really big. We're tackling some massive issues, climate catastrophe, like animal liberation, when the norm is so much oppression and normalization of objectification and use of animals. So we're up against a lot and pushing against the status quo, and sometimes you might doubt if you're making any difference at all. You might feel really emotionally overwhelmed, just totally spent and burnt out with compassion fatigue, but you also fear that if you slow down, that the causes that you care about will suffer. And so that can lead to having suppressed emotions because you're like, I just gotta keep going. I don't have time to stop, like the animals need saving today. And in doing so, in suppressing how you really feel because there's so much pressure to keep going and keep pushing and pressure to pretend, it can end up having random outbursts of anger and suppressed emotions on your colleagues or your loved ones, and just creates more disconnection in some of the infighting and fissures that people have been talking about throughout this conference as well. Some other ways that this might look is, people pleasing and feeling scared to say no, which is one that I really resonated with, of just wanting to do as much as I could, not realizing that I'm not actually as effective as I can be when I'm spreading myself so thin, which is something I see a lot in this movement. You might feel stuck in a position that isn't actually fully aligned. You might really love the mission of the work that you're up to and your higher context, but the way, like the how that you're engaging with it, is not super aligned with your gifts, your talents, like how you're really here to show up and serve. And you might put a lot of this busyness and constantly saying yes to projects that come across your table and working so much really as a distraction from inner healing, from some of the wounds that we avoid looking at by staying so busy and avoiding that quiet time with ourselves. You might also just have a challenge slowing down and resting and feel really guilty and anxious when you do try to. Again, because it's like this massive scope of your work, the fear that the causes you care about are going to suffer. And so I really love this quote by Prentice Hemphill, because what I just spoke about are some of the individual symptoms, like how you can start to notice this in yourself, but this is not an individual pathology. This is rooted in grind culture, which is rooted in white supremacy and capitalism, and so it's going to take some time to unlearn, individually but also culturally, in our institutions, in the organizations that we're a part of. And so if you're a part of an organization, if you are in management in organizations and you lead in some way, we have a responsibility to create cultures that are dismantling the white supremacist, capitalist drive to just everyone do the most you can, no breaks, no vacations, disrupting that. But we also have an individual responsibility to be aware of our needs and boundaries and be fierce self-advocates and know how much is too much. And so we need that inner self-awareness for that as well. And so this quote of how do we recover some of the capacities that oppression, disconnection, and a culture of denial have tried to institute inside each of our bodies? How can we create a space that contributes to a lived experience of liberation for more of us, all of us? And really, I feel like this is about expanding our capacity to feel, because we often bypass some of the tough emotions with that pressure to just keep going and do as much as we possibly can while spreading ourselves thin and ultimately not doing the most effective work that we can do. Kind of taking time to take care of our well-being can be the last on the list at times. And so expanding our capacity to feel the tough emotions so that we can authentically access our joy and essentially bounce back quicker, because even the most centered and grounded person is going to have things that trigger them and knock them off their center. And it's a matter of having practices, tools, support systems that are going to help you come back to your center and bounce back more quickly so that you can stay sustained in this work over the long haul. And part of this need to expand our capacity to feel is because leadership is really emotionally activating. Yes? Yes. Okay, you're putting yourself out there. You might be creating new initiatives and campaigns. You might be bringing a new idea to your team and the people that you organize with. You might put out some new content if you're a content creator. Whatever this looks like in your work, I think that it really comes back to this innate fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success, stories of lack and limitations, stories of not enough, not good enough, not worthy. That can really come up when you're doing this work and you're not feeling heard or seen, when something doesn't go the way that you were hoping it to. And so it brings up these like inner shadows that have a lot of roots in inner child healing. And when we expand our capacity to feel and really lean into embodiment, it allows us to build our capacity to keep showing up when things get kind of scary and uncomfortable, when you're putting yourself out there so that you can continue to show up in a way that is grounded and rooted in your wholeness. Because as you are trying new things and expanding and growing into new levels, it really brings up our self-protective mechanisms. And so that's a sweeter way that I like to talk about self-sabotage. It's your self-protective mechanisms, because our nervous system wants to keep us safe. And if you grew up with more chaos in your housing, if you grew up around scarcity and suddenly you're talking with funders about thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, that shit might be really uncomfortable for your nervous system. And this is really about regulating ourselves so that you can go into those conversations confident and feel worthy and capable and supported. And we're essentially teaching your body that it's safe to be seen and supported. Because a limitation that I see often with traditional leadership development and conversations about this is it's a lot of mindset focused and speaking to the cognitive, rational mind. But these are deeply ingrained subconscious stories that live in the body. And so we move through it, we literally have to physically move through it in the body to release it and actually transform and have a path home to wholeness. And so embodiment can look a number of different ways, and I'll speak to that in a little bit, but it might be breath work, dancing, journaling, therapy. It's kind of all of it. It's not just one piece, but I find that the body piece is often the missing link in a lot of ways that people approach this. And so as you start to explore this for yourself, it really requires moving slower and listening longer. Because our bodies are always talking to us. And we have become socialized to ignore the language of our bodies in many instances. From as early in school and being taught we have to hold it before we can go to the bathroom on certain breaks, and having to sit still for 8 hours a day, all of these different things that have taught us to ignore the language of our bodies. But there's a lot of wisdom in the body. And when you start to build up that body-mind awareness, you can become aware of your own stress response and how that shows up in the body. That tells you when it's time to slow down or shift or try something new. And so this requires really taking time with yourself and getting curious and developing that relationship with self and the body. And so I asked this question, which when I do these, I facilitate sessions for individuals, groups, organizations, and I often do it in these 1 to 2 hour long breathwork sessions where you're laying down and doing a 3-part breath and like really letting it out and having really deep emotional releases and leaving feeling lighter, freer, with more clarity. Which actually, when I initially proposed this session, I was hoping to do a community healing session, but I was like, I don't want to like have everybody crying and then they got to rush to their next session and meeting. I'm like, that feels irresponsible. So I'll tell you at the end of this how you can practice this from home next week with me. It's where you can like have space to just really let it all out. But I ask this kind of question when I'm facilitating sessions, and actually there's a number of other questions I've offered in the Whova app in the poll section. I don't expect you to answer these right now. I just didn't get a chance to make a slide of it, and I wanted you to have some questions for self-reflection to dive into. But like what's ready to be felt emotionally and somatically so that you can authentically access love, peace, joy, and get a taste of liberation and freedom on this long journey towards like the lived reality of liberation for all of us. Because oftentimes we are bypassing the tough emotions, suppressing it, denying it, and then wondering why we don't feel happy and fulfilled. Because you're skipping the feeling, the challenging things. And so often when I lead these sessions with people, they leave, like, one of the most common things I hear is, I ask at the end, how do you feel? And like, I feel free. And to hear especially like Black women, queer people, like people who experience other levels of marginalization and are doing really meaningful work, say that they feel free is really fulfilling and really important. To have that feeling of like, we are the macrocosm of the micro, or we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. And so having that instance of feeling what's possible, we then begin to demand that from the rest of our lives and have that like sustained vision of what we're trying to create for our communities. And farm animal sanctuaries are kind of this like taste of liberation, this taste of what's possible. Conferences like this where we gather and are surrounded by like minds doing this meaningful work, that taste of liberation, this is what's possible. And we have to create more spaces like that for ourselves to continue in the long haul. So, we don't always have an hour to 2 hours to like take care of ourselves. You might get a text from someone that like sends you almost into a spiral right before you have to go do something really important. So how can I wanted to offer something like, you don't have all that time, you have like, you're about to facilitate, you're about to meet with someone, you're about to do something really important, or you just want to take care of yourself in like a shorter amount of time. This kind of quicker practice for increasing your body-mind awareness and emotional regulation. So it begins with really having that awareness of what your stress response is and how that shows up physiologically. My belly gets like, I start feeling weird stuff in my belly. Sometimes you might get really hot. You might get like tension in the shoulders or constriction in your throat. So whatever that looks like for you. Some people get like sweaty palms. So being able to notice the physiological response, because often we feel it in the body before we process it in the mind. And so if you can notice it in the body, you can address it more quickly. And so kind of getting out of the mind and into the body, paying attention to that. And then just like checking in like, ooh, what happened? What created this for me? How am I feeling? What do I need right now? And I say breathe/move, like breathing, meditation, taking a moment to just be with your breath and yourself can be really helpful. However, for those who have experienced significant trauma, those who have anxiety, those, even if just in the moment, you're at a level of activation between like a 5 to a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're feeling really activated in that moment, trying to just sit there and breathe and meditate is probably going to make you more activated and anxious and more ruminating on your thoughts. And so that's where movement comes in. I love to dance. I was preparing for this talk and I went dancing last night with friends, and I was like, I'm going to embody the joy. Like my talk's about embodiment, let me embody the joy. But there's a lot of research that supports the power of yoga for trauma recovery and nervous system regulation. It might also look like a workout or whatever your movement practice is, but just knowing that that's a really important piece of this here. And if you have felt like meditation doesn't work for you, try movement. So essentially, I'm sharing this as inspiration to just make you aware that another way is possible, that you can use your gifts to do the work that's most meaningful and fulfilling for you and feel really aligned, grounded, and at home with yourself and your truth as you do. You don't have to abandon yourself in the process of contributing to the causes that you care about. Coming back to the story I shared in the beginning around my car accident, your health, your well-being is on the line. You cannot do this work without taking care of yourself. I would have been no use to the causes that I care about if that accident would have been more fatal. And it was directly related to how disconnected and disembodied and unpresent I was in my life. And so it's really crucial for your effectiveness in the work that you're doing and the sustainability of your sacred service. It is sacred work that you're doing. And also just because it's for your well-being, because you're a human beyond the work that you do, that deserves to feel good and healthy and whole and well. And so I offer some more questions as I shared in the poll, and I'll just read some of them off so you can know what to expect when you go in there, looking for some ways to dive deeper into yourself and help come into this vision of sustainable sacred service if you're maybe feeling like a shift is necessary to come into greater alignment. You might ask yourself, what do you really love to do? What do you love? What would you love to be doing, and how would you like to contribute to the causes you care about using your gifts? If you removed the barriers of that's not feasible, who's going to give me money for that? That doesn't exist. If you just allow yourself to dare to dream a seemingly impossible dream for a moment. What boundaries would support you doing less of what drains you and more of what lights you up? What can you let go of or say no to that would create more spaciousness? What people, resources, and practices help re-energize you and feel more connected? And what's one daily devotion that you can commit to taking better care of yourself? So all of those questions are available in the Whova app in the poll. So feel free to, explore those and journal on those when you have more time and spaciousness to sit with those questions. And if you are feeling really jazzed up about what I'm sharing, this is really resonating with you, as I shared, there's an opportunity to do breathwork with me, to release repressed emotions, come home to yourself, feel really good in your body. And it's called Release and Renew. I'm doing it online next Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon, again, from the comfort of your home and online via Zoom. So that's available. All these links are at bewellwithbrielle.com/Ava. I also have a little QR code on my business card if you want to scan it after. I also talk a lot about this with other leaders and advocates from I've facilitated for Mercy for Animals, Compassion in World Farming, Vegan Activist Alignment, Alliance. I'm missing an A. A student advocacy group in Michigan that I work with. So I do this often, and I have a virtual retreat that I'm hosting on November 5th and 6th with scholarships available for folks of color in this movement. So if this really resonates with you, opportunity to dive deeper. And then, I can also facilitate this for your staff retreats, for virtual wellness programs for your organization. I would really love to see more focus. I know that there's threads, people are talking about it, and now it's okay, let's have some spaces where people can actually do some of the work. And I also offer retreats and have opportunities to work with me one-on-one. If you really love the way that I facilitate and you are a person of color in the animal advocacy movement, I'm also the director of the Global Majority Caucus, and I bring all of this kind of energy to everything that I do. So we have these kind of conversations there, and I open anything that I facilitate with a grounding. So all of that is available if it resonates and you do desire to dive deeper. And I want to just leave some time for questions. Questions about like the practical application of this. You're like, yeah, this is cool, but like, what does this actually look like in my field, in my role? Objections are also welcome. The yeah, buts, or just comments. So I'll pause there, open it up. Thank you so much for your time. Any questions, comments?
Just a comment here. Yesterday I had to find the bathroom and I feel like we were busy, but you still helped me find it instead of just pointing, so I thought that was really nice. And I appreciate the gesture and the wonderful presentation and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
She just didn't want you to go on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Natalia.
Hi.
Thank you for such a beautiful talk.
Thank
I
you.
have a question. I always commit to myself, I'm going to do better, I'm going to take care of myself. And in 2020, I spent my whole year meditating and taking care of myself, and I felt so good.
Yeah.
But then I got a full-time job and got busy with activism, and I just stopped doing everything. And I know how important it is to do. So basically, I guess it comes to discipline. But sometimes you're like, okay, I have only like 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and I can like go online and I don't know, contact with maybe sign some petitions or have 15 minutes to meditate. So I'll go with like signing a petition, doing some research
Yeah.
to help animals instead of like prioritizing meditation.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, what would be the best, I guess, reminder, like how to keep track of self-care?
Yeah. So one thing I really love a language switch that I do is instead of discipline, devotion. Discipline can like come with some like harsh things. It's like, I gotta be more disciplined. It's like, I don't want to be disciplined, but devotion, it's like, yes, I'm devoted to my well-being. Like, yes, I want to show up for myself. And I think there's also a sense of urgency that comes with like, I just got to do one more thing to like move the needle a little bit more forward. And it's a bit of a short-term perspective. And so I invite us to have a more like longer view of what's possible. And we're only going to be able to, again, dream seemingly impossible dreams, like come up with like, oh my God, no one's doing this. Like, oh my God, look at this gap that we're missing. If we actually have time for that reflection and we're not just constantly like, oh my God, I got to do this thing, I got to do this thing. Like, I know for myself, when I take a moment to meditate and just breathe or even just go for a walk in nature, I come back with so much more inspiration and connection. And I'm like, the things that I felt like I had to rush to get done, it's like, oh, I see this better way that I could be doing this. And I can move through things with more ease, an expansive vision and inspiration. So start with what you have, use those 15 minutes to spend some time with yourself, whatever that looks like, and just notice the difference. Notice the difference when you return back to your work, like how that feels for you after you take that time for yourself. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for this. This is, I was like feeling all sorts of feelings, and I felt so comfortable. I usually like sitting on higher platforms and like getting comfortable. I felt like just with you facilitating this, I could just show up and sit in the way I was comfortable with. So thank you for that.
Yes.
And I guess my question, I was looking at the questions and the polls, and something that I really do want to work on is boundaries, and not in my workspace, but more in like, toxic family situations. And when we talk about boundaries, there is an external entity also involved in cooperation from that external entity to respect those boundaries. So how does one work through that?
Yeah. Right? Because we're relational beings, like we don't exist in isolation. And I think part of it, is that piece of knowing our own needs and boundaries and communicating them. But then you also have to have like the self-respect and courage to walk away when those things are not being honored. you know, and that might mean taking more space. That might mean like, you know, we only engage in this way, or it might mean that like I really value this relationship and I know that's going into family dinner is going to be a little difficult, so I'm going to like plan for that. I'm going to plan to like not schedule a bunch of other stuff, or I'm going to plan to just go to dinner, and then I'm going to go back to my house where I feel safe and supported. And so kind of creating a container where you can touch in and still have that relationship and connection, because I don't want us to just like lose connection altogether and cut people out of our life like all the time. Because again, expanding our capacity to feel is also expanding our capacity for discomfort. Yeah. Yes.
First, thank you so much. It was a beautiful talk. And when you were mentioning about meditating, and if you do not feel comfortable with high levels of anxiety, which I resonate a lot,
Yeah.
I mentioned movement.
Yes.
And this for me was the first time that I ever heard about that, because I tried meditation and I couldn't.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking, okay, so maybe I should try movement, and I was like, how?
Mm.
And I wanted to know if you have any suggestions on how to start the movement.
Yeah. I think this is a really fun way where our cultures can get involved, right? So it's like in Black culture, we like hustle. We do like these like line dances and like, you know, so you don't necessarily, if yoga is not your jam and you're like, I don't want to just like put a song on in my room and start dancing, like that feels a little strange to me. Like go to where, like what are the ways that your culture already ingrains embodiment into your, you know, there's dance, there's like drumming, you know, like all of those things. Like those are also incredibly liberating and embodied practices. So yeah, that's one place to start. Yeah. Yes.
I really appreciated your talk as well.
Thank you.
Got a lot out of that, and I just was gonna ask you, in a professional setting, how do you best suggest, beyond being a personal example and living
Yeah.
with your own embodiment, how would you suggest that for people maybe above you in your career or in a professional setting?
Yeah, I really appreciated that Leah touched on this during her talk about the importance of leadership modeling this, because it can be difficult if like the people in leadership and management don't value it and are modeling like, we're just gonna keep go, you know, and it might be that there's a misalignment there of like that might not be the best fit. But it can also be like, you know, I would love for us to start our meetings with just like 5 minutes of some music playing in the background for us to like get fully settled, you know? And so looking for the opportunities, you might also be like, I think it would be really cool, like I've been noticing that the people in our organization have like, everyone feels really exhausted. Does everyone else feel that too? Like, what can we do about that together? Like maybe we need some support with that. So yeah, just kind of naming what you're noticing and offering like, here's a possibility that we could do together as a team. Yeah.
I have a follow-up to that. I don't know
Yeah.
if we're at time, but I work inside of a bank, and sometimes like opening up to people is like kind of like not safe. How do you
Yeah.
do that if you can't like listen to some music at the beginning, but you still want to connect with people?
Yeah, I guess what's the context? Like, are you in a like virtual meeting? Are you in an in-person
Yeah,
setting?
It's often virtual.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, they're trying to make small talk, but sometimes I just put up a wall.
Yeah.
And I want it to be like a little more
Yeah.
human.
Right. You know, honestly, I think that we are all waiting for an invitation to be more real. Who really likes small talk, you know? Like, right? You know, but we all do it. We're just like, hey, what's the weather? What do you do? And then, but like, maybe you are the one that asks the question of like, what do you guys love to do outside of this, you know? Like, I want to know about that.
Yeah, just speaking to this topic, I know in a lot of our meetings, they're virtual, but we take 1 minute of deep breathing first,
Yeah.
which really helps connect and ground and center. But a question we've been using a lot as an icebreaker lately is what has recently brought you joy?
I love
It
that.
really talks to that, but it's something that's kind of light enough that it can be small talk.
I see.
Yes, I love that question. What brings you joy? Yes. Hey, Destiny.
I'm Destiny, everyone. Just more of a comment.
Yeah.
Just thank you again. respecting your boundaries, Brielle is the person that you need to book. Every single like ED should be in this room right now, honestly, because this is just so important. Yeah, I'm getting a little emotional, but yeah, like the work that she does is just so important, and I think that we all need to like respect that. And yeah, this should have been like mandatory for a lot of people. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Yes.
So I'll just kind of build up that and say, I think this is the most important work in the movement.
I agree.
honestly.
I agree.
I think that this is, without this, we can't do what we want to do for animals or people or the planet. And so thank you for doing this. I work at Fern Sanctuary, and I'm wondering, our care staff are dealing with trauma
Yes.
all the time because they build these relationships with our animal residents, and then, inevitably those residents pass on, and so there's just a lot of grief and trauma
Yes.
all the time. And I think that this could be amazing for them, but I'm curious how somatic healing and breath work and those types of things can be used to deal with that like repeated trauma that they're dealing with all the time.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the importance of an ongoing practice. And so when I do work with groups and facilitate for people, once I teach you the pattern, I can like send you a playlist, and like you can do your own self-facilitated things as well. And so, and also speaking about like co-regulation. So if people are like doing investigations together, there's ways that like you can be back to back and like synchronizing your breath so that you're like having more grounding as you're like on the grounds doing the work, or in the streets like doing activism, like taking a moment after like a heightened thing to like ground and regulate together. So there are some tools and practices around that, but ultimately it's like they have to be even more vigilant of like doing this work even more, and having even more support around like a budget for them to do that, whether that's having someone come in or having them having their own budget that they can do the practices that resonate with them the most. So that ongoing support is going to be really important. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for validating, because I'm also feeling that like we need this. We really need this. And so I am in the process of speaking to some people and trying to get some funding to be able to do this for the organizations in our movement at a larger scale. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, in the meantime, feel free to reach out and connect for me to facilitate something for your team. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, it's time, by the way, so if you have to go, it's just lunch though, but I want you to eat, like nourish your bodies, hello. But I will stay and answer a few more. No, I don't feel bad if you have to leave though.
So just like you said, I feel like this is obviously very important, just like everybody here said, because over in New York, there's just so much infighting. People are just not getting along with all of these organizations.
Yeah.
And aside from, when it comes to debating effective tactics, when it comes to animal rights advocacy, because that's one part of the infighting. The second part of the infighting is just probably personal trauma. People
Period.
just will not get along, period. Even when we're not talking about effective animal rights advocacy,
Yeah.
just in general, just as friends, people just can't get along. So I feel like this is very important and can actually be used as a leeway to help these people get along, because obviously we need to stay connected for total human and obviously animal liberation. Right,
which is why I think that we need to do this work even more, because so many people who come to animal liberation are like, there is that like, I don't even like people that much, so I'm here for the animals. It's like, okay, but we are in this together. Like we have to take, we have to own our own shit and like take care of ourselves so we can be in relationship and do our best work for the animals. So yeah, I am 100% there with you.
It happens so many times.
Yes.
I'm tired of it. And I've only been doing advocacy for around a year. I've been vegan for around 4 years.
Yeah.
When I came in to do advocacy for the first time, because prior I didn't have any vegan friends, I came into the movement. I was so happy and optimistic. I was like, yes, I'm gonna meet so many vegans and I'm gonna be friends with everybody. I come in and I'm like, what's going on? Nobody's getting along.
Yeah.
This is so weird, because I'm, active like on vegan Reddit and whatnot.
Yeah.
So everybody's always on vegan Reddit and other forms of vegan social media, and they talk about not having any vegan friends, right? And it's nice to have vegan friends and all that, but it's not the best when these vegan friends can't get along, when there's infighting and all of that. So I came into the movement optimistic. Again, only 1 year doing advocacy, and it's just so insane.
Yeah, I know a really great person, Josue, in Guatemala, who is doing work around, what is it called? It's like conflict resolution, but from like a healing justice perspective. And so I think his work fits in really well with this as well. And it's being done a lot in like racial justice, criminal justice spaces around this push towards like transformative and healing justice. But it can be applied to our movement to support and address infighting as well. So
what was it called, you said?
Which part? Oh, it's
Yeah.
healing justice, transformative justice. Yeah, so that space is doing a lot around healing some of that conflict resolution and like healing circles to process shit between people who have conflict so that organizations and groups don't dissolve because of that stuff.
Yeah, and one thing to end it off with,
Yeah.
Obviously when it comes to infighting, when it comes to effective animal rights tactics, that's one thing, and it's not as bad when
Yeah.
it comes to just people not getting along. I can understand why people will fight when it comes to effective tactics for animal rights advocacy. I can see why there's conflict when it comes to that. We want what's best for animals. But when it comes to infighting just in general, just because people can't get along, there's trauma, there's ego
Yeah.
that gets in the way, that's even worse.
Yeah, and we're ultimately like, a lot of us are just protecting ourselves from pain and ultimately robbing ourselves of the need for human love and connection. Yeah, but we're gonna do more of this, yes. Yeah.
If we still have time.
Yeah, I'm here, but feel free, everyone, get your lunch.
I was here thinking because all of the connections we had these days, and there were a lot, and a lot of information, and then you find your mind full of ideas and a lot of things to do, and we're always taking notes. Oh my God, I can do this, I have to do this. And I was talking to her here, and she got emotional here because of the Grammy moment, and me too. Because we stop and then we think, what is this I'm feeling? And it's the load of responsibility and things that we have to do as like a professional vegan, like the guy said before. We work for that. That's our career, and that's also our mission.
Yeah.
And then it seems so big, and then we see ourselves so small, and so many tasks and so many things to do. I'd like to hear from you. How do you cope with that? Because that generates some anxiety.
Yeah.
And also, how do you prioritize? Because I know you probably connect with a lot of people and probably have ideas all the time. And you used to be very busy, then you transitioned to a healthier way of living and working and serving. How do you do this today in a more balanced way?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm so glad.
It was amazing, and I love this round. I really needed it. I didn't know how much I needed it until I got here, and I'm glad it came at this precise moment.
Yeah.
Because I was feeling so tired. Good tired.
Yeah.
It was amazing, everything, and I wanted to soak it in and meet everybody and do everything, learn everything I could, and then now I stop. And I have to be ready and well to do all the work that has to be done.
Yeah.
And how do you organize that? So maybe I can take some ideas.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, I think, it's been a journey of probably 5-6 years now of on this path from the car accident to now feeling more grounded. But I find, I've found what works best for me is, I don't do so great working for other people. If I try to take a full-time job, I get, I did not so long ago, I took on a full-time job. So I was like, oh, this is super aligned. Yes, let me do this. And then I was a week or two in, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like how I felt when I was about, like, shortly before I crashed into that pole. So now I know, like, when I am and it's like sometimes we do hard things. Sometimes we push ourselves to, like, meet a deadline that's gonna, you know, get us more money to do the work that we're doing. It's not that you're, like, never gonna feel tough, challenging things. Like, that's gonna happen. But it's about, like, it not being a persistent, where it's like every day at work you feel anxious and, like, have to take long baths and, like, you know, do all these things to cope with it. It's okay if it happens sometimes, but we don't want it to be persistent and ongoing. And so for me, I've learned what works best for me, of, like, taking that time to notice, okay, so if I'm going to work for someone else, like 15, 20 hours max, because I also have my own work that I really love to do, you know, and knowing that I do really well when I can have a break in the middle of the day. Like, the simplest thing of taking a lunch break. If you don't take your lunch break, please take your lunch break. Close your computer and eat some lunch, you know, and be present with your food. Like, small things like that, of having that time to really be with yourself. So meditation every day really works for me. Taking lunch breaks, having time in nature. And then in preparation for this, like, I was feeling a lot of things. I was like, oh my God, I'm, like, talking to all these people with so much money. I'm like, what do I have to know about leadership? Like, I was having all of these things coming up. And then we also have our own personal shit that happens in our own relationships and all of those things that come up. And so, you know, I didn't really participate in the conference that much yesterday, because I wanted to be really grounded and in my power for today's session. And so that meant not doing as much yesterday and going dancing with friends and singing karaoke and, like, just having fun. And now I'm like, all right, I'm ready to talk about the thing, you know? And I know that that's gonna make the most difference, of, like, me being able to show up grounded, authentic, and in my power is what's gonna make the most difference. Not me stretching myself thin and trying to do a million things. Yes. Yes, Peter. And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, you know how every day started with a 7 a.m. meditation session?
Yeah.
And then that was it.
Right.
I was thinking, you know, it would have been great if, like,
all
at the
day.
beginning of every session, just like a short breathing or meditation exercise. Because, like, those sessions were intense.
Yeah.
Just going from,
and then we got to rush to the next thing.
Right. And just the act of, like, going to sessions and, like, oh, I'm going to miss this, I'm going to miss that.
Yep.
That would have been great, because I missed all the meditation. I was sleeping.
Yeah, same.
Getting up and, you know, and you can still have that, but, like, you can also have it throughout the day.
Yeah.
And I think we would have been maybe better prepared, or just more at peace.
More present and actually able to retain the information that we're getting when we have opportunities for rest. And so I love that they had the meditation room, like, you know, there are some things in there, but I think that constant reminder of people, like, you don't have to go to every session, you know? It's okay. You don't have to have a meeting during every single meal. You know, like, I know some people have done this for themselves, of just, like, take a break. Go up to your room, you know, go outside, get some fresh air, go to the meditation space. But yeah, that reminder, that invitation and permission that, like, you don't have to do it all is important. So thank you, Peter. And thank you, all of you, so much. This was fantastic.